Chapter 2. A London Particular. It was a Monday afternoon in November and already growing dark, not because of the lateness of the hour, it was barely 3 o'clock, but because of the fog, the thickest of London pea-soupers, which had hemmed us in on all sides since dawn, if indeed there had been a dawn, for the fog had scarcely allowed any daylight to penetrate the foul gloom of the atmosphere. Fog was outdoors, hanging over the river, creeping in and out of alleyways and passages, swirling thickly between the bare trees of all the parks and gardens of the city, and indoors too, seething through cracks and crannies like sour breath, gaining a sly entrance at every opening of a door. It was a yellow fog, a filthy, evil-smelling fog, a fog that choked and blinded, smeared and stained. Groping their way blindly across roads, men and women took their lives in their hands. Stumbling along the pavements, they clutched at railings and at one another for guidance. Sounds were deadened, shapes blurred. It was a fog that had come 3 days before and did not seem inclined to go away, and it had, I suppose, the quality of all such fogs. It was menacing and sinister, disguising the familiar world and confusing the people in it, as they were confused by having their eyes covered and being turned about in a game of blind man's bluff. It was, in all, miserable weather and lowering to the spirits in the dreariest month of the year. It would be easy to look back and to believe that all that day I had had a sense of foreboding about my journey to come, that some sixth sense, some telepathic intuition that may lie dormant and submerged in most men, had stirred and become alert within me. But I was, in those days of my youth, a sturdy, commonsensical fellow, and I felt no uneasiness or apprehension whatsoever. Any depression of my usual blithe spirits was solely on account of the fog, and of November, and that same dreariness was shared by every citizen of London. So far as I can faithfully recall, however, I felt nothing other than curiosity, a professional interest in what scant account of the business Mr. Bentley had put before me, coupled with a mild sense of adventure, for I had never before visited that remote part of England to which I was now travelling, and a certain relief at the prospect of getting away from the unhealthy atmosphere of fog and dankness. Moreover, I was barely 23 years old, and retained a schoolboy's passion for everything to do with railway stations and journeys on steam locomotives. But what is perhaps remarkable is how well I can remember the minutest detail of that day, for all that nothing untoward had yet happened, and my nerves were steady. If I close my eyes, I am sitting in the cab, crawling through the fog on my way to King's Cross Station. I can smell the cold, damp leather of the upholstery, and the indescribable stench of the fog seeping in around the window. I can feel the sensation in my ears, as though they had been stuffed with cotton. Pools of sulphurous yellow light, as from random corners of some circle of the inferno, flared from shops and the upper windows of houses, and from the basements they rose like flares from the pit below, and there were red-hot pools of light from the chestnut sellers on street corners. Here a great boiling cauldron of tar for the road-menders spurted and smoked an evil red smoke. There a lantern held high by the lamplighter bobbed and flickered. In the streets there was a din of brakes grinding and horns blowing, and the shouts of 100 drivers, slowed down and blinded by the fog, and as I peered from out of the cab window into the gloom, what figures I could make out, fumbling their way through the murk, were like ghost figures, their mouths and lower faces muffled in scarves and veils and handkerchiefs, but on gaining the temporary safety of some pool of light, they became red-eyed and demonic. It took almost 50 minutes to travel the mile or so from Chambers to the station, and as there was nothing whatsoever I could do, and I had made allowance for such a slow start to the journey, I sat back, comforting myself that this would certainly be the worst part of it, and turned over in my mind the conversation I had had with Mr. Bentley that morning. I had been working steadily at some dull details of the conveyance of property leases, forgetful for the moment of the fog that pressed against the window, like a furred beast at my back, when the clerk, Tomes, came in to summon me to Mr. Bentley's room. Tomes was a small man, thin as a stick and with the complexion of a tallow candle, and a permanent cold, which caused him to sniff every 20 seconds, for which reason he was confined to a cubbyhole in an outer lobby, where he kept ledgers and received visitors with an air of suffering and melancholy that put them in mind of last wills and testaments, whatever the business they had actually come to the lawyer about. And it was a last will and testament that Mr. Bentley had before him when I walked into his large, comfortable room with its wide bay window that, on better days, commanded a fine view of the Inn of the Court and Gardens and the comings and goings of half the lawyers of London. "Sit ye down, Arthur, sit ye down." Mr. Bentley then took off his spectacles, polished them vigorously, and replaced them on his nose before settling back in his chair like a man content. Mr. Bentley had a story to tell, and Mr. Bentley enjoyed being listened to. "I don't think I ever told you about the extraordinary Mrs. Drablow." I shook my head. It would, at any rate, be more interesting than the conveyance of leases. "Mrs. Drablow," he repeated, and picked up the will to wave it at me across his partner's desk. "Mrs. Alice Drablow of Eel Marsh House. Dead, don't you know?" "Ah. Yes, I inherited Alice Drablow from my father. The family has had their business with this firm for, he waved a hand back into the mists of the previous century and the foundation of Bentley, Hugh, Sweetman and Bentley. Oh, yes. A good age." He flapped the paper again. 87. "And it's her will you have there, I take it?" "Mrs. Drablow." He raised his voice a little, ignoring my question, which had broken into the pattern of his storytelling. "Mrs. Drablow was, as they say, a rum 'un." I nodded. As I had learned in my 5 years with the firm, a good many of Mr. Bentley's older clients were rum 'uns. "Have you ever heard of the 9 Lives Causeway?" "No, never." "Nor ever of Eel Marsh in Shire?" "No, sir." "Nor, I suppose, ever visited that county at all?" "I'm afraid not." "Living there," said Mr. Bentley thoughtfully, "anyone might become rum. I only a hazy idea of where it is. Then, my boy, go home and pack your bags and take the afternoon train from King's Cross, changing at Crewe and again at Homerby. From Homerby, you take the branch line to the little market town of Crinthin Gifford. After that, it's a wait for the tide." "The tide?" "You can only cross the causeway at low tide. That takes you onto Eel Marsh and the house, Mrs. Drablow's. When the tide comes in, you're cut off until it's low again. Remarkable place." He got up and went to the window. "Years since I went there, of course. My father took me. She didn't greatly care for visitors." "Was she a widow?" "Since quite early in her marriage." "Children?" "Children." Mr. Bentley fell silent for a few moments and rubbed at the pane with his finger as though to clear away the obscurity, but the fog loomed, yellow, grey, and thicker than ever, though here and there, across the inn yard, the lights from other chambers shone fuzzily. A church bell began to toll. Mr. Bentley turned. "According to everything we've been told about Mrs. Drablow," he said carefully, "no, there were no children." "Did she have a great deal of money or land? Were her affairs at all complicated?" "Not on the whole, Arthur, not on the whole." "She owned her house, of course, and a few properties in Crinthin Gifford, shops with tenants, that sort of thing. And there's a poor sort of farm, half under water. She spent money on a few dykes here and there, but not too much promise. She spent money on a few dykes here and there, but not too much purpose. There are the usual small trusts and investments." "Then it all sounds perfectly straightforward." "It does it not?" "May I ask why I'm to go there?" "To represent this firm at our client's funeral." "Oh, yes, of course." "I wondered whether to go myself, naturally, but to tell you the truth, I've been troubled again by my foot this past week." Mr. Bentley suffered from gout, to which he would never refer to by name, though his suffering need not have given him any cause for shame, for he was an abstemious man. "And then there's the chance that Lord Boltrope will need to see me. I ought to be here, do you see?" "Ah, yes, of course." "And then again," a pause, "it's high time I put a little more onto your shoulders. It's no more than you're capable of, is it?" "I certainly hope not. I'll be very glad to go up to Mrs. Drablow's funeral, naturally." "There's a bit more to it than that." "The will?" There's a bit of business to attend to in connection with the estate, yes. I'll let you have the details to read on your journey, but principally, you're going to go through Mrs. Drablow's documents, her private papers, whatever they may be, wherever they may be. Mr. Bentley grunted, and to bring them back to this office. I see. Mrs. Drablow was somewhat disorganized, shall I say. It may take you a while. A day or two? At least a day or two, Arthur. Of course, things may have changed. I may be quite mistaken. Things may be in apple pie order, and you'll clear it up in an afternoon. As I told you, it's very many years since I went there. The business was beginning to sound like something from a Victorian novel, with a reclusive old woman having hidden a lot of ancient documents somewhere in the depths of her cluttered house. I was scarcely taking Mr. Bentley seriously. Will there be anyone to help me? The bulk of the estate goes to the great niece and nephew. They were both in India. The bulk of the estate goes to a great niece and nephew. They are both in India, where they have lived for upwards of 40 years. There used to be a housekeeper, but you'll find out more when you get there. But presumably she had friends or even neighbours. Eelmarsh House is far from any neighbour. And being a rumman, she never made friends, I suppose. Mr. Bentley chuckled. Come, Arthur, look on the bright side. Treat the whole thing as a jaunt. I got up. At least it'll take you out from all of this for a day or two, and he waved his hand towards the window. I nodded. In fact, I was not by any means unattracted to the idea of the expedition, though I saw that Mr. Bentley had not been able to resist making a good story better and dramatising the mystery of Mrs. Drablow in her queer-sounding house in a good way beyond the facts. I supposed that the place would merely prove cold, uncomfortable, and difficult to reach, the funeral melancholy, and the papers I had to search for would be tucked under an attic bed in a dust-covered shoebox and contain nothing more than old receipted bills and some drafts of cantankerous letters to all and sundry, all of which was usual for such a female client. As I reached the door of his room, Mr. Bentley added, You'll reach Crinthin Gifford by late this evening, and there's a small hotel you can put up for the night. The funeral is tomorrow morning at 11. And afterwards you want me to go to the house? I've made arrangements. There's a local man dealing with it all. He'll be in touch with you. Yes, but... Just then, Tomes materialised with a sniff at my shoulder. You're 10:30, Mr. Bentley. Good. Show him in. Just a moment, Mr. Bentley. What's the matter, Arthur? Don't dither in the doorway, man. I've got work to do. Isn't there more you ought to tell me? I mean... He waved me away impatiently, and at that point Tomes returned, closely followed by Mr. Bentley's 10:30 client, and I retreated. I had to clear my desk, go back to my room, and pack a bag, inform my landlady that I'd be away for a couple of nights, and to scribble a note to my fiancée, Stella. I rather hoped that her disappointment at my sudden absence from her would be tempered by pride that Mr. Bentley was entrusting me with the firm's business in such a manner, a good omen for my future prospects, upon which our marriage, planned for the following year, depended. After that, I was to catch the afternoon train to a remote corner of England, of which until a few minutes ago I'd barely heard. On my way out of the building, the lugubrious Tomes knocked on the glass of his cubbyhole and handed me a thick brown envelope marked Drablow. Clutching it under my arm, I plunged out into the choking London fog.